just say thanks for being here. We're going to wait a minute and then wait a minute and I'll do my intro. Thanks for being here. We're going to wait a minute and then wait a minute and I'll do my intro.
It sounds like someone's got her speakers open.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here. We're just going to wait a minute for everyone to get online. And once everyone's online, then we will go ahead and get started. So just one more minute and then we'll get started. Thanks. All right, hopefully everyone is here. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is our first Help Lunch and Learn today. Today's lecture is Help, There's Water All Over My Property. I'm excited to introduce you to Ashley Rodgers and Betsy Pearce from Environmental Services. They'll be sharing about how to manage stormwater on your property, a variety of different topics under that. Thanks again for joining us. This series will continue for the month of June and July. And please type your questions into the comments or chat box and we'll discuss it at the end. Help Lunch and Learn.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today. We'd like to do a quick poll before we get started, just to know who all's attending with us today. So if you would, just type into the chat box kind of what your role is or who you are, whether you're a homeowner or a contractor or a builder. If you would, just type that into the chat for us, please. And then also, if you'd let us know whether you live in the unincorporated area of Wake County or if you live in one of the municipalities. We'd just like to get a good idea of who's with us today. And Abby, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that, if anyone adds anything into the chat.
I don't see any comments so far, so we might still be waiting on a few to jump on.
There's also a delay from what we hear and what they hear. So people, just give people a couple minutes maybe.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started, but go ahead and put that into the chat. Okay, so today we're going to go over a few general topics, all related to stormwater. We'll go over some of the basics, some of the regulations and responsibilities of different parties involved, some common questions that we get as employees of the county, places that you can find some great information, and then some examples of actual complaints or issues that we've been a part of over the years. So the basics of stormwater. Let's go through some of kind of what we call the basic universal truths of stormwater. Water flows downhill. Water is always going to find the lowest spot. And so if you live obviously at the bottom of a large drainage area and you are kind of at the low point, that's where the water is going to come. It will always find a way to get downhill to the lowest spot. And one thing that's important to remember is that erosion is a natural process. Erosion is just the detachment or movement of, soil or rock through, again, this natural process of wind or water, kind of just wearing away at that over time. So obviously we have massive examples of the power of water and what it can do in terms of erosion over time. But the other important thing to keep in mind is that there are things that we can do or do that actually accelerate this natural process. And so what we have found is that as you have more development, as you add more impervious area, and impervious being kind of those hard surfaces, not the natural vegetation and plantings, but as you add hard surfaces where the water can't soak in as it otherwise would, then you're increasing that runoff, increasing the effects of stormwater, and potentially increasing erosion issues or stream impacts. One statistic that's commonly cited is that when you get impervious over 10%, you start to see those kind of impacts into streams and receiving waters. So why is it important that we manage stormwater? There are a few reasons. First off, obviously, to protect our environment. We want to manage our water resources in a responsible way so that they're there for us for drinking water, for recreation, and all of those things that we enjoy. And the second is to protect property. Obviously, flooding is a huge issue, and we want to make sure that we're not damaging structures or people's properties with those increased effects of stormwater. And then finally, sometimes it's for compliance. We have regulations, federal, state, and local regulations that address stormwater. And so a lot of times you will see some of these actions taken and devices put in, and they're primarily there for compliance, for the long-term either benefit of nutrient control, meaning like a nitrogen impact, or the rate of water that's coming down.
Yeah, we're going to talk about regulations and responsibilities. So there's kind of a tiered approach. Wake County is delegated from the state, and so we have the responsibility to run a stormwater program, an erosion control program, and a floodplain program. We provide services for 6 municipalities within the county. We have to provide information to the state at the end of the year on stormwater management. And then we also work with homeowners, and homeowners have their own responsibilities once you take over ownership of the property. So as far as erosion control, during construction, the developer, the builder, the contractors are responsible for keeping sediment within their sites, and they have the goals of protecting waterways and protecting adjacent properties. They're responsible at that point for all maintenance of and compliance with the rules that the county provides them. So during construction, you might see a sediment basin, which is what you see on the left. On the right is home construction with silt fence, and there's a trash bin in front. You'll see a permit sign. What you don't want to see is sediment in the roads. And during construction, the owner, who we call the financial responsible party, is ultimately responsible for keeping sediment on site during construction activities. They're responsible. They have contractors who work for them, builders who work for them, but ultimately the owner is responsible. Post-construction, once the property has been turned over to the property owner, solving drainage and erosion problems falls on the homeowner. There, is occasionally a gray area where you may have purchased a house, but it's still within that first year of ownership, or there's still active construction in the subdivision, and the developer might get back involved, or maybe builder issues. But ultimately, responsibility will fall on you as a homeowner to manage the water and to protect the soil. So if you have to protect against erosion, first of all, you have to manage the water. So the water has to be either spread out completely over your property, or if you have targeted areas of problem, you can redirect that runoff with swales, French drains, downspout extensions, use things like rain barrels, or you can install stormwater devices on your own property. But ultimately, the best method of holding your soil in place is vegetation, grasses, shrubs, and trees with deep roots. So the county for stormwater, our responsibility for post-construction falls during review of the plans that are submitted for new development. And we have a role in acceptance of those final stormwater devices. There's an as-built survey that is submitted to us from the developer and their engineer. And once those are accepted, they are turned over to the homeowners associations for maintenance. The county occasionally will be involved in doing inspections, but the annual inspection requirement falls on the owner of that device, whether it's a homeowners association or if it's a commercial device. The owner of that commercial property is responsible for maintenance and inspection. Also for stormwater, every lot in the county has a limit on built upon area. They're initially based on zoning, so there's a zoning limit, but most of the time there is an impervious limit that is lower than the zoning limit, and those are shown on the recorded plat for the property. Some examples of stormwater control measures that you might see around the county are dry ponds. The first one that you see that looks green is a dry pond. It should only have water in it during rain. The one on the bottom is a wet pond, so they hold water all of the time. The upper right-hand corner is a bioretention area, otherwise known as a rain garden. And you'll see those around town, some also, especially at commercial devices, but you can also put those in your backyards. Apparently you've got, a kind of a depressed area. They may have under drains to help infiltrate the soil and are planted with varying kinds of vegetation. You may also see, you probably won't see a sand filter. There's some at large commercial places. There's some at NC State, but they're usually under parking lots. Level spreaders are sometimes near a wooded area to try to disperse water before it goes into a stream buffer. Permeable pavers are sometimes used around the county, but Wake County does not use them to get credit for impervious area, so we discourage their use. They're used more in coastal areas. So again, the responsibility for stormwater control measures during construction, it is the responsibility of the developer. They will build them. Their engineer will certify that they have been built according to the plan they designed. And then once that as-built is accepted by the county, then they're turned over to the owner, and whether it be a commercial owner or a homeowners association. So after construction, they're turned over to the owner. The diagram on the left is a clip from a record plat, which shows the area of it says BMP in this example, which is best management practice. You also hear them as stormwater control measures. So it shows the area of that device and its easement around it. And then on the right is actually a picture of one of the devices that we have in town. So again, HOA responsibilities: ensure the proper operation and maintenance of each device, repair and reconstruct a measure if needed, have annual inspections performed by a licensed professional and submitted to the county, and budget appropriately for current and future maintenance and replacement needs. So this is an area that we are looking at changing the way that we're tracking these. We have to report inspections back to the state. We don't have a good transfer process right now for the HOAs. We have a good acceptance process on our end to make sure that they have been built properly, but we don't have a real good transfer process to the HOAs, and that is something that is on our radar to build within the next couple of years. And we want to get to the point where those annual inspections can be easily uploaded to the county's portal rather than having to get mailed in and then entered by staff here. But it's definitely something that we will be working on within the next 3 to 5 years. So common question that we get is, why is there a drainage easement on my property? The purpose of those easements is to pass the water across the property. Often you'll see a culvert such as this on the left that should be armored to prevent erosion coming from the water coming out of that pipe. And then the water is passed over usually a grassed area to send the water to a low point. Another program area that we manage is floodplain. So we have a flood hazard ordinance. We have mapping of the FEMA floodplain available on the county IMAPS, which is our GIS for the county, and it's available to the public. It also shows flood-prone soils, which the county regulates, which is not a requirement of the federal government, it's a local requirement. So we keep development out of both FEMA and out of the flood-prone soils areas. We also restrict development from backwater areas from pipes and culverts. So our goal in Wake County is to not allow any development in a flood hazard area so that we don't see pictures like this one on the lower right-hand side from Crabtree Creek during a flood. And that was one of those flood events that was not associated with a tropical system. It was just very intense thunderstorms. And that flooding is in Raleigh. Raleigh is, as a result of flooding events like that, has been working to change its floodplain ordinance to restrict development from the floodplain so that they don't have more of this in the future. Another protective effort that we have is riparian buffers. So the riparian buffer ordinance comes from the state. So there's an ordinance for the Neuse River and for the Jordan Lake, and it restricts development or clearing from 50 feet from the top of a stream bank. There are two different zones. The first zone closest to the stream, which is 30 feet, is required to have undisturbed vegetation. There can be, some vegetation clearing, but it's usually restricted to things like, noxious weeds like poison ivy and other invasives. Whereas the outer zone can be managed vegetation like grass. So you can clear as long as you replant and stabilize the area. We also have water supply watershed buffers, which can be up to 100 feet on larger streams. And those are regulated by the county. So who enforces the buffers? Kind of depends. In the Neuse and Jordan Lake, because they're state rules, they go to the Division of Environmental Quality if we see a violation. But if it's a water supply watershed buffer, then we refer those to our planning department. Some of the other problems that we see, if you have a creek near your house and it's eroding, who's responsible? Unfortunately, those usually fall to the homeowner, unless there's active construction going, or like if you had a construction project in the road, say DOT came around and was doing something that caused that, then it is going to be up to the homeowner to do a repair. And so like if you had a case like this, you would probably have to come back and armor that stream channel. You could put in a request to pipe it. So depending on whether it's in an easement, which this probably is. So if you're in a municipal area, I would recommend going to your municipal government to make sure that you're allowed to pipe it. Otherwise, you could talk to your HOA, but bear in mind that a closed pipe system does not carry as much water as an open channel system. Some other examples of problems that we see on the left, there's a lot of sediment and there's standing water, and it's because there's a floodplain that goes between two properties. It's a FEMA floodplain, and basically anywhere you have a stream, you're going to have the water come out of its banks once in a while. And so in this case, because it's a FEMA floodplain, it's a larger floodplain, and sediment has deposited outside the stream and then has caused the standing water because the sediment has deposited, so the water's then not going back to the stream. But again, this is a private property issue. We found some blockages in the stream channel, but the stream channel is owned by the homeowners association. So it goes back to the property owner and the HOA to resolve the issue, or to choose not to resolve the issue. Often the case is that the do nothing approach is what is selected. On the right-hand side, we had an owner that called about pipe failure and a hole that occurred in their front yard. This pipe comes out of a pond that's upstream that was a private pond and is more than 50 feet off the road. So again, this is a private property issue. So we directed the owner that it's private property owner and that any repair is their responsibility. Does this make people happy? No, but it's something that information that we share frequently. And unfortunately, drainage law in North Carolina, if you go to Google and type in drainage law in North Carolina, you're going to find plenty of information. It is based on common law and guided by the principle of reasonable use, and ultimately goes back to the court system. So basically what it says is that a property owner can pass water from a higher property to a lower property. And if there is damage downstream, it's up to the court to make a decision in that dispute. It's not up to the county or municipal government to make that determination. Case law has typically found that damage has to be structural damage. But we share this information commonly with homeowners that they're like, well, I'm going to call my attorney, and we go, okay, that's up to you to do. And typically the attorney confirms the information that we had given them. And we rarely get involved in the neighbor disputes that are about drainage.
But it is worth noting, as Betsy said, that in North Carolina, the downstream property owner is required to accept that water from upstream. And so it is important to note that even though the county does not enforce this, there are state regulations that basically say you can't block up something. You can't block up the end of a pipe from dumping onto your property. So you do have to, if you are a lower property, accept that water that's coming to you. So those are some of the common questions that we've gotten, and in terms of what we regulate, whose responsibility certain pieces are, but we're going to show you a little bit more where you can find some information on some other common questions that we get. If you've recently been to the Wake County website, it went under a pretty big update, and so we can do a demo now, or we can do it afterwards.
I think we should wait.
Yeah, we'll do it afterwards if we have time. But if you go to wakegov.com and then to watershed management's section, we have a lot of great information on this website. You can see in the bottom right corner, we have specific areas for stormwater, erosion control, and floodplain, just like we've talked about. And then also we have a frequently asked questions section. And so here we have it broken down by a lot of the common categories on which we get questions. And so you can click on any of these items, for example, drainage law, like we just talked about, and get that brief summary of the basics of that particular topic. So this is a great resource if you ever have questions. Another awesome resource that we have is our IMAP system. And if anyone's familiar with this, it's also great. We can do a demo of this at the end as well. But essentially, you can type in your address or a PIN number or a name, search for a property, and then there are a ton of different layers that you can select based on what you're interested in. So there are layers for floodplain, for flood-prone soils, for drainage basins. If you're in a municipality, Raleigh shares this system with us specifically. So there's a layer called Stormwater in Raleigh. And so if you're in that municipal area, you can see more information about their stormwater network. But there are a lot of great layers that you can use on this system. So it's great to play around with. One important thing here for us that we'll go through next is reviewing the plat for a particular property. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a way to click on the plat, and we'll try to walk you through that at the end here. But this is an example of what a plat looks like when you pull it up. One thing to keep in mind is that there are multiple pages typically to a plat if it's a larger subdivision. And there's a ton of information that you'll see on these plats. So it's really important that you just read them carefully, because the information that you're looking for, a lot of it will be here on the plat. So we'll walk through a quick example looking at, for example, lot 20. So on this lot, one of the things that we commonly get a question about is, what's my impervious surface limitation? And so here, the way that this is designated, and this is a pretty common way of designating the impervious surface, it's MISA equals 7,000 square feet. They're highlighted at the top in yellow. And if you look at the legend on the left-hand side, that what we call MISA, or MISA, is the maximum allowable impervious surface area for that lot. And so that's a quick way of finding what your impervious limitation is for your lot. Like Betsy said, in Wake County, that could be based on your zoning, or it could be based on stormwater considerations, but that is your impervious limit.
And I would point out that the county doesn't set that number. Then when the developer submits plans for a subdivision, the developer decides what stormwater they're going to provide, and they run calculations to determine, what impervious limit they're going to set and determine, and with the stormwater they're going to provide. The county approves their calculations, but we do not decide what their limits are going to be.
So the next page here, I did a screenshot of the first page of this record plat. So very commonly, when you have these plats that are multiple pages, the first page is generally going to be an overview, and it's going to have a lot of notes on it. It does look like a lot when you look at it, and it is, but there's some great information in here if you just read in certain areas. So one place that we wanted to particularly highlight is if you're in the county, and this will obviously vary if you're in municipal areas that have their own regulations, but in Wake County, what you would be looking for is, after you found your impervious surface limitation, you need to know, is there what we call a perpetuity statement on your plat? And so that's usually found in the notes. So here you'll see it highlighted in yellow, and it's essentially maximum impervious area square footage on each individual lot will be stringently enforced with no exceptions into perpetuity. And this is a common statement that you're going to find on any residential subdivision in the county that happened probably since 2006. And so what that means is that you're essentially locked into that impervious limitation on your lot, unless you can negotiate with a neighbor or another property owner within that phase of your subdivision to essentially swap some impervious with you, so give you some of their impervious area if they're not going to use it. And we have a process at the county that you can go through to memorialize that, where we would review it and then it would be re-recorded on a plat. Or the other option, which is, I would say, much less commonly used, is because this whole subdivision complies together for stormwater, and because, as Betsy said, the original developer made that determination of allocating the impervious for the whole subdivision, in theory, you could also go back and re-examine the entire subdivision in order to change those impervious limitations. But in practicality, that really doesn't happen. So really, if you do have a perpetuity statement and you needed more impervious, your only real option, generally speaking, is going to be to work out that swap with a neighbor if you can. So the other thing we wanted to highlight here on the plat is looking at easements. So for example, this easement, which encroaches a little bit onto lot 20, is for a wet detention device that you see there. And the easement area is highlighted in blue, and it's labeled as a 20-foot permanent construction, access, drainage, and maintenance easement. That easement is in place to make sure that there's adequate room to access and maintain that pond, and also so that county officials can come and do inspections and have access to see the pond as well. And on the plat, again, on that notes page on sheet number 1, if you click on there, there's usually a note just like this that references who's responsible for those stormwater control measures or stormwater best management practices. So typically, if you're in a residential subdivision, that note should say something similar to this, where the stormwater devices are going to be maintained by the homeowners association. So another thing that we want to look at on the plat, just to show you an example, is this is a different type of an easement. This is going from the street down to a well site, but it's a 20-foot public utility drainage and access easement. And so usually if you have an easement like this, or just a straight drainage easement that has either a swale or a pipe in it, a lot of times you'll see it like this where it kind of straddles two lots. So if it's a 20-foot easement, you'll often see it 10 feet on each side encroaching onto the property. But that's another example. And if you go back out to the plat on that first phase, or sorry, that first sheet of the plat, there's usually also a drainage easement note there that says who's responsible for a drainage easement. So in this case, you know, it makes it clear that these are essentially going with the land, with the subsequent owners if they get sold, and that it's the responsibility of those individual property owners to maintain the drainage easements and any structures that are in them. There's also a note here that's important. Betsy had mentioned this earlier, but in the county, at least, if you have an easement, a drainage easement on your property, you can't pipe that unless you get an approval from Wake County to do so.
Okay, I'm going to go over some examples of some of the drainage complaints that we get, and we've got a bunch of videos that people have sent us. So this particular one, they're like, look, see all this water, and our response is, yes, there's a lot of water. It rained a whole lot. What's evident in this particular one is the water is not staying completely within the drainage swale. It has gone into the road. And that is because the swale system is designed for a specific design storm. And so the rainfall event exceeded the design storm. So when we get those rainfalls where we're getting like, 2 inches of water, in less than an hour is when we see things like this. And so basically we just explain this to the homeowners and say, yeah, this happens from time to time. It happened a lot last year because weather has definitely been getting worse. So we'll just look at it again. Watch the truck drive through. So we had a rainfall like this last Thursday that covered most of Raleigh. Oh, come on, it's not wanting to go to my next one. Okay. This one, let me see if it'll actually take us to YouTube. So a homeowner shot this video.
Betsy, we can't see the video. I think it's based on how you're sharing your screen.
Okay.
So you might have to change which window you're sharing.
No, it's not that one. I think it's that. This one? Do you see it now?
Yes, I can see it now. Thanks.
Okay, we'll go. So this video was shot by a homeowner last summer in a new neighborhood where showing runoff coming off of a new lot onto his lot. I wouldn't call that a river.
flooded out, boys. Look, and this is the big time right here. Look. Freaking, it's not split that way and it's going over there. All my grass is dead. This is flooded out. Look. Look.
Let's see if we can get back. This one. This one.
When you originally selected, but to the left.
And then, okay, so that video was shot by a homeowner in this same neighborhood. So you see the pond back there. So he lived downhill of this area. And this is not the lot that he was talking about, but he was complaining about water coming from the higher lot onto the lower lot. He did reach out to the builder, and the builder did a little tweak to help him, but his big complaint was about his grass being dead from all the water, and unfortunately that is a homeowner responsibility. He planted fescue in the shade, which is always requires a lot of maintenance to keep a good stand of grass in the shade, especially fescue, which is high maintenance. This screenshot is from another neighbor in the same neighborhood. His complaint was that he was having erosion in his backyard. And so I went and looked at it. And so this is not erosion. All this is the sediment areas that you're seeing is where the pine straw has been pushed aside by that heavy rain coming off of the homeowner's fairly steep slope, which has a really good grass cover on it. And the blue line is just kind of showing you the concentrated runoff area. I reached back out to the homeowner, explained it to them, and then did not get any additional feedback. This is another video from the same neighborhood. And so the water comes off of the road, comes down ends in a cul-de-sac, but the water, there's a lot of topography here. And so the water comes down through the driveway pipe, and it's supposed to come down this rock channel and go to a stormwater device, but the water is not turning like it's supposed to. Water doesn't know that it's supposed to turn. It's looking for the low point. And so that water has escaped and was going into the homeowner's garage. So we worked with her and with the contractor on a solution. So over on the right side, they added a lot more rock. And so far there has not been a problem. The water has been contained within that channel. So I'm seeing an error on my screen. Are you all seeing that?
I just see a photo and
Okay,
with the words
good.
example.
Okay, good. So this video is from a different subdivision. Oh. Where's the little remote?
Right here.
Maybe that was our warning. That, I think it timed out.
Sorry, y'all, we're having some technical difficulties.
That's okay. We can still see the video and see the water flowing. So.
Okay, so in this subdivision, which was actually another one that was relatively new, the stormwater devices hadn't been accepted yet. So the builder and contractors are all, and developer are all still involved. The video was shot by a guy, not who lives in this house, but who lives behind it in an older subdivision. And so the water was going down a swale and into his backyard, which was not what our plan showed. Our plan showed something different that the builder and the contractors did not install. We eventually got the homeowner who was receiving all the water in touch with the builder and developer, and he allowed them to come on his property and reestablish a swale that had been there prior to construction of this neighborhood, and then that redirected all that water to a low point, which is a stream. And so we haven't received any complaints since then.
So some of y'all may be wondering what you can do if you do have a drainage issue on your property, what you can do to kind of work on that. There are a few different options. If there's something minor that you need to do, you can do some minor grading, you can do some landscaping. Either the homeowner or a qualified contractor could be able to do some of that. The only caveat that we'll say, and this applies to kind of all of these different options, is that you need to check with your local permitting authority, because regulations do vary between the county and different municipalities, just to make sure that whatever you're doing, you don't need a permit for. But so there's some options that you could do yourself that involve landscaping or some minor grading work with you or the help of the contractor. But then there are other times when you might need to get more technical assistance. And so some of the people that you might want to reach out to are the Wake County Soil and Water Conservation Group, which is putting on this series of lunch and learns. They're a great resource for technical assistance on these type of issues. And they can also give potential lists of, contractors or soil scientists or folks that have experience with the kind of issue that you're having that might be a resource that you could call. And so we would suggest that you contact, either soil and water or licensed professional engineers or soil scientists or an experienced landscaper. But if you do get up with any of these folks, any of these licensed or experienced folks, then you do want to probably ask what their experience is in this type of a scenario, and even for photographs of some of the work they've done previously or references, just so that you're sure that you're getting someone who really knows what they're doing to help you out. If you do go the more technical route, there's some great devices. We're going to just talk about a few of the more common ones. Rain gardens are one, and like Betsy said, that's kind of they're often put in areas that are already chronically wet or are in a low or shallow area, but it's essentially a shallow depression that is landscaped in a specific way. Sometimes you put in a little bit different soil or media mix in there and specific plantings. But the idea here is that it's a landscaped area. It's going to kind of collect that water and let it soak in and infiltrate over a few days. And when it's, so when it's wet and raining, you might see something more on the left-hand side where you've got a little bit of standing water in that rain garden. But in times when it's not raining, then it just looks like a landscaped area. It just looks like kind of a natural, pretty area in your yard. And so the next type that we often see on individual lots are going to be rain barrels or cisterns, and probably everyone's familiar with these as well. They're very inexpensive, can easily be done by a homeowner if you wanted to. There are a lot of resources where you can buy these. I mean, Lowe's and Home Depot, you can get some. We have a lot of vendors locally that will sell either kits or some already put together. But these are another great option. A lot of people will put these under a downspout, like you see in these photographs, and collect some of the water from a roof typically, and then you can reuse that water for another purpose. Most people use it for watering their yard or their gardens. But these are two common examples that we see on these individual lots. They're both kind of what we would consider green stormwater infrastructure. If you've heard that term before, it's kind of a volume-based control where we're trying to slow water down or capture it or absorb that rainfall so that you can reduce how much water is leaving your property and reduce the pollutants in it. And ultimately, it helps recharge groundwater and just benefit for the entire environment. So a few other things that you might see are installation of French drains, like we had mentioned before, and again, a good contractor can help you with this, or redirecting runoff through a swale or a channel. A lot of people will do natural creek beds that kind of go into the landscape. So again, it's a landscaped feature that looks good in your yard as well. And with that, we wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So we would be happy if y'all will put any questions into the chat if you haven't already, and we can get to those. And if not, we might do a brief tutorial on iMaps.
Ashley and Betsy, we did have one question come in from Christy. She was asking about MISA or MISA on land that is annexed into a municipality that does not. She was asking, like, what do you do about that if it does not have MISA on the lot?
It depends on the municipality. They each have their own stormwater rules, so you would need to reach out to the local government and ask them what the zoning limit or other built upon restriction is, if there is one. We've had cases where Wake County approved lots have then been annexed by municipalities, and some of them honor the limits that we have on the plat and some of them don't. Yeah, it's completely up to the new local government that's taken over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's show y'all just briefly iMaps and what you can find on here. So Betsy is going to type in a street name, and if you just type the first few letters, obviously it'll pop up and you can select that. So this is where we were looking at earlier on that plat.
Right.
Just for reference.
So if I pick, randomly pick one of these, it's going to highlight the lot, and then these other icons come up. And so this middle one that looks like a sheet of paper is the link to the deeds and plats. And so if you click on maps and plats, then we're going to get to part of the plat that we were showing earlier that had multiple pages. And so there's where you can find the limit for the lot. Let me see if I can get this to behave. Okay. Not liking that. But yeah, so it's got your lot number, got the impervious restriction for the lot. If there are easements, they'll show up. Yeah, I see. If I can get the right one to go away. We'll go back to the map.
I would click on the PDF version. That's easier to see.
Yeah. So yeah, the PDF version showed the whole thing. You can zoom in so you can read all the notes on them. Like this says sheet, is that 2 of 3?
Yeah.
Which lets you know that there's more sheets. Sometimes if you're looking for more information than that, you'll need to give us a call, because we can walk you through the Register of Deeds website, which houses all of these forms and documents, because you might have to go look. You can go there and do a search for Mornington Estates and find all of the documents that have been recorded that go with that subdivision. If you go to layers, there's many layers. We're going to zoom out so I can show you. So some of the base layers, you've got, these are parcel outlines, and then these are the streams. And so if you click on floodplains, the FEMA floodplains have showed up. So you've got blue is floodway, this pink color is the 100-year floodplain, and the purple is a future floodplain. And then we also regulate flood soils. So if you go to the soils layer, it's going to give you all of the different types of soils. And I'm going to turn off the all and just show you the flood prone soils. So this is showing you how much more floodplain area there is than is just associated with FEMA. FEMA is limited to areas with drainage areas over 1 square mile, whereas the flood hazard soils basically cover almost all of the small creeks within the county. And so our goal is to try to keep development out of that area also. But we do have some methods for developers to reduce the flood hazard area by actually going out and doing a soil survey of the property.
And really what a flood hazard soil is, just for those who aren't aware, it's a type of soil. There are multiple types. And it just means that they're prone to flooding, that they historically have been areas that have flooded in the past.
There's a jurisdiction layer. We use that one all the time when somebody calls us to find out. Like in this one, it's showing up gray, which is Wake County. We'll try to zoom. And you'll see, you know, Holly Springs, Fuquay, Garner, Cary's over here. But we get a lot of phone calls from people calling to ask us questions. And then we'll look it up, find out that that person lives in Raleigh, and we'll refer them back to the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary or Apex as needed. Yeah, what other layers I think are?
Let's turn off jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And then scroll down a little bit.
I'll also show them aerials.
Yeah.
USGS streams just gives you the let's see if we'll get them to show up. Yeah, they're the darker blue ones, which are the ones that show up on a USGS quad map. So they are larger streams. And if we zoom back in on parcel layers, then you can use the topography. And you can see the contour lines on the lot. And so you can see where it goes from a high area to a low area. And so we use that layer every time we get a call. We'll look to see which parcel is higher than another parcel. The other one that we use all the time is the aerial imagery. And so you can toggle from the base map to the aerial photos. Wake County right now has 2017 aerial photos. We will be getting by the end of the year 2021 imagery, which will be a great help to us. So like on this particular street, it will go from looking undeveloped to you'll see houses because this street is almost completely built out. And it goes back in time. You know, you can go back and see what it looked like, you know, out there, 1999. Our internal maps, we can now go back to 1958, which is has been helpful when you get people. We get a lot of calls from folks asking us about potential properties that they're looking to buy, and we'll go and do some research for them about. Usually, it's about floodplain and impervious are the two biggest questions that we get. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is very, very handy. And if all of our realtors would learn how to use it, it would be a great help to everybody.
Between IMAPs and the information that you can find on the plat, there really is a lot that you can discover if you just know where to look.
Yeah. So another one is septic. So Wake County is on well and septic, and so you've got septic points. And so for this particular lot, if I really wanted to get to the information, I'm going to try doing it this way. I don't know if it's going to work. There's another way. Yeah, it just says that they're building one versus, there's a roundabout way to get your septic information, and I think it's kind of cumbersome. But if we go back to the individual parcel and scroll all the way down, you can go view septic permit. But unfortunately, this now takes you off into our permit portal. Actually, it took me to a different place. So that is so yeah, it is not, it's not obvious to people how to do it. Yeah, you have to click here, which most people are not going to know that. And then it takes you, I think, to our portal. To another place where you won't know what to click on. Because I think it's under attachments. And so, yeah, here's the attached permit. And so the information is all out there for the public. It's not necessarily easy. Or quick. And so from here, you get a copy of the septic permit. And what most of us are looking for is this is the as-built survey. And it's showing where the septic lines are on the property that we selected. And so there should be both a approved septic area and an approved repair area. So these lines are showing the approved septic, but I'm not seeing a recorded repair area. And so when you get a bunch of questions about septic, we're going to refer you back to a different set of staff.
We are not seeing the
Okay.
The drainage field, just so you know. I think it might have opened in another window.
Are you seeing the yeah, it probably is, but are you seeing the paperwork at all?
No, I just
Okay.
I'm still
Okay.
seeing the attachment page.
All right, good to know.
And then I just have one question whenever you guys are done with the demo.
Okay, you can go ahead. I'm going to try to figure out how to get back where I was.
Okay. My question is, I loved the demo where you showed us the plat and walked us through everything on there for like the neighborhood. But a lot of the old, that was a recent one from 2019. A lot of the older ones don't have information on there. So how do I, as a homeowner, find that information? And if, like, who do I ask if my plat doesn't have that?
Okay, I'm going to go to my house. I'll show you mine. Yeah, I live in a 50-year-old neighborhood. And so if we go to my plat, you used to be able to, yeah, see, it just says deeds, there's no plat. So if you don't have a plat come up at all, then your next call is to figure out what jurisdiction you're in and contact the planning department. So mine, I'm in the ETJ of Raleigh, and so I would need to call Raleigh and ask them and what my zoning limit is.
Okay.
We've got some other ones, and I'm trying to think of a good example that would come up with just a non-detailed.
Yeah, that's what I see a lot, especially I loved on the one that you showed how it actually showed like the details about the SCM or the BMP. I usually can't find that level of detail on the ones I'm looking at because I'm looking at early 2000s and they don't always have that posted.
Yeah, the older plats, especially like you said with the SCMs, the stormwater control measures, a lot of times they would just show an easement that would say BMP easement or something like that, whereas the newer ones are a lot more specific.
Yes. But do the planning departments like hold those somewhere? Like the detailed plan?
Most of them do. Now, what you're probably going to get is they're going to ask to get your contact information, and so they can go do research. Like we used to have a staff member here who was really good at finding those old ones because they were we have a vault downstairs. This building used to be a bank, and there was a vault, and in the vault there were old files, and so she could pull them out. But they also have, because their records, they probably had records going back 20, 30 years in paper files in the regular planning area. And what scares me is that it's all being remodeled right now. And so God knows where those things are going to end up. But a lot of the old ones where they had those, like I said, what they called a paper subdivision, was a surveyor could submit a drawing of the lots and the roads and record it, and they had a subdivision. So you didn't have any information really, other than you might be lucky and it might show some drainage easements, might show a stream, but it might not show anything. But yeah, the ones that are going back 20, 30 years were in paper files.
Okay.
And every time I've purchased property, I have gone to the planning department of that associated property and asked for information, especially if there was vacant land next door, to find out what the zoning was, or if there were plans that had been submitted for development.
Thanks. Those are some good tips and things how to problem solve.
Yeah.
Totally understand the whole paper records dilemma.
But yeah, it's usually the planning department.
Thanks so much. It looks like we're just at a little after 1. So I don't know if we have anything else, any other questions. I don't think we have any other questions, Michaela, or anything else that you want to cover, Betsy or Ashley?
Nope, I think we'll do a quick debrief on our end and talk about how to do better next time.
All right. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone who tuned in.
Thanks for hosting.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone.